So this is Brenda, and
This is Georgina.
And this is Rosemarie.
And I propose that for a while we try to say our names before we speak again, and then we'll be able to just, because it will help whoever transcribes this identify us, although I'm sure it'll be easy after that. So just try to ignore the little thing that's going on here. Well, you can't see it, but it's showing us that it's running.
Okay.
And it gives us little sound waves. It tells us how loud we're talking.
Oh,
And
so
if
when
you-
I start shouting,
If
it'll
you go,
register?
it makes a certain sound, a certain wavelength when there's ums, and it's pretty cool because you can begin to identify people's ums,
Oh.
right? And then quickly X them out. Okay. So today is what, May 30th? Tuesday, May 30th?
Mm-hmm.
And we are in Vienna, Austria, in Dublin, Austria, northern part. And we've been here, Einzwei Drive here. This is our 4th day. So we're going to kind of talk about some thoughts going through our head at this point. I can suggest one thing is just even like a highlight so far. A couple things that have been highlights for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then also on the other side, a couple of things that seemed a little frustrating or odd or weird. This is like the affect part too, which we'll come back around to. But just for something to warm us up.
In the museums,
Rosemary here.
this is Rosemarie. In the museums where we have entered, I think we've found some very interesting surprises in the built environment. But I've also found surprises in that the most compelling thing for me have been the stories of the people that we encounter that are memorialized in some way in the museum. So when we were in the art museum, I was taken up with the disability, illness stories of the artists as represented visually and also narratively. And then in the music museum, again, I found most compelling the disability and illness stories of the composers.
Mm-hmm.
So we learned about Mozart's lifelong ill health, Beethoven's deafness, Egon
Sheila.
Egon Schiele's psychiatric disability and eventual death, so that we get a sense of the way that disability and illness imprints a life and imprints the aesthetic product of these lives. That's been very compelling to me.
Were you surprised at how much we've seen already? You usually were surprised. Maybe you'd like to talk about why we'd be surprised. I don't think I was, but I didn't know where we would find.
Right. Well, you end up in any kind of a biographical account. Disability is going to be in there if you know how to look for it.
Yeah.
So when I was reading in detail Mozart's life, I knew that he'd been ill throughout his life, and I wanted to find that out in there. And also all of the other disability, illness, and mortality stories, which I was quite taken with, of course, that are very characteristic of that era, but not now. And that is the childbirth and the infant mortality statistics.
Yeah. Yeah, which
And-
means also that disability was and death and disease on the prevalence.
The prevalence is different, of course, from our prevalence. So those are the kind of hidden disability stories
Yeah.
that I thought were compelling. But I think that you'd have to know to be looking for them.
Even I have to agree because I was here just 4 years ago and saw, well, I didn't go to the House of Music, but again, lifelong knowing about Beethoven's deafness, and that he wrote that testament letter, the Heiligsdatter testament to his brothers, in which he confesses, much about the deep sorrow and loss that he's feeling and depression. But the surprise for me was literally the aspect of now encountering it again with us. And I knew about Mozart's long illness. And of course, I'd seen Sheila before and wondered also about the kind of psychiatric thing that might be going on with him. So I knew it, but it didn't really,
Right.
I didn't know it in any detail. It's just like everyone knows Beethoven's deaf. So Beethoven was deaf. But for something that was really striking this time, both being in his house and thinking about that, the house where he composed so much,
Right.
from 1804 to 1808, was it? Yeah,
Something
somewhere
like that.
Don't ask me about numbers.
Yeah. Anyway, well, what about you,
That up.
Regina?
Well, for me, what I've been struck by so far is the range of museum spaces that we've been in. So we've been in a fairly traditional fine art museum setting. We've been in what I think of as a historical documentation center, the architecture
The
museum,
architecture one, yeah.
which is basically, if you imagine taking a book and all the images and text and just tearing out the sheets and then hanging them on the wall.
Really close together, and a
Yes.
lot of them.
Yeah. And then we've been in 2 house museums.
Mm-hmm.
So the Beethoven House Museum and the Freud House Museum.
Good point.
And finally, in a sort of what's a kind of new category of museum, the House of Music,
Yeah.
which did seem to feature all kinds of access, multimodal
Right.
experiences.
But also felt very much like a science museum.
Yeah. Well, science museums often
Right.
are in advance of
Mm.
art museums in terms of innovations in display and modalities of access.
Mm-hmm.
In the House of Music?
Yeah.
House
So,
of Music? Yeah.
And they like their technology more.
Yeah. So, for instance, in the Fine Art Museum, I was using a technology that is available to everybody. It was not designed for blind people.
The audio guide?
Though I was struck by the fact that the device that they gave me did have Braille on it. And I don't know if that would have been true if I was a sighted person.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a better version than the ones that are just a touch screen, which are essentially unusable. And then the audio guide at the Freud Museum was a more old-fashioned, but it did have buttons, so that you could, as long as somebody told me what button to press,
Right.
I could access information.
And that's what the collaborative aspect of our
Yeah.
Yeah,
project is.
yeah.
Yeah, because we also, we had to tell you in several places, they gave you the audio device, but we had to tell you that there was actually a number on the wall
Yes,
that you
yeah.
could plug in.
Yeah, there are newer technologies that some museums are implementing, which are called beacons, BEACONS. And basically what it means is you have the device, and then when you approach something
Mm-hmm.
that has description, you then activate it. so that it reads the chip in your device and knows that you have approached this or that site, and then it launches the content.
And with that, Georgina, do you have to have the device on you, or is it like what Catherine Ott developed at the Smithsonian for the polio 50th anniversary exhibit, where when you approached the device, you were standing in an environment that would trigger it to...
Yeah.
Is it like that?
There are two different kinds. So there's one, and I forget the exact name of it, but basically the speaker is overhead and it's like a shower.
Yes, exactly.
So it just
That's
comes
what
down.
how she did. Yeah.
So the individual is standing underneath it, and you hear the audio if you can hear.
Right.
But people around you don't hear it, so it's very targeted.
Like a shower.
At the listener. So that's one technique. The other technique is to have a smartphone-like device that is alerted when there's a beacon nearby.
Right.
And then launches the content.
I love the metaphor of beacon.
Yes, yeah.
Which
and
is...
shower also.
Yes. I mean, shower is a tactile metaphor, and beacon is a visual metaphor.
Yeah. So in terms of the thinking about like the beacon and the shower metaphor, I think my core delight was the House of Music so far. I kind of regret that I hadn't found it before. And I think for some of the reasons that you all said is that the way that they worked to kind of do a multimodal and if not universal design for access, at least there was enough different ways to access it that I felt like everybody was going to get something out of it. That was really enchanting to me. And even when the different composers, 6 different rooms, 6 different composers, they seemed to have worked pretty hard to lay those frameworks out in different ways, so you just didn't get bored with the same.
Right.
Like in total opposition to the architecture museum.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
That was designed, and I was really enchanted. So I would love to bring all of my friends and my family back and make them go through that room where they kind of did the science of hearing.
Yeah.
Like how it works and the different aspects of it. A lot of people, everything that was there was stuff I already knew, but I think a lot of people don't know, like why it is that it's hard for you, why noise bothers you at some point, what level, and for some people at a lower level than it does other people, and how all of that works, and then the interactive aspect of it that you could go around. The other thing that I really liked about that museum was how surround sound the music was.
Yeah.
So when we walked into the rooms with the different composers, the sound was loud enough in part that I was getting most of the music, and it was surrounding.
Yeah.
Which is what looks best for you, rather than just like coming from one speaker.
Yeah.
So the kind of ironic flip side of that though too, and then I was at the moment. I mean, I had goosebumps and tears. Goosebumps on my arm and tears in my eyes when I came around the corner and I saw the full text, the original text of Beethoven's Heilige Testament to his brothers. I mean, it just completely floored me. And I was telling Georgina, I think while you were busting around though, I played back, I made a little video then of me standing in front of it where I just said what it was and my impact. But what it's a 20-second video. But the irony is that the music was so loud in the background, which of course I knew there was music there, but I don't have a sense of complete scale. So when I listened this morning to that with my earphones, I can barely hear my voice. I mean, I think somebody probably with better hearing will be able to extract what I was saying. But I can go in later with technology and add that back on. But
what do you mean? How do you do that?
Just like this, so you're going to upload it to like iMovie. Okay, that little video clip, and you can even strip out all the music in the background if you wanted to. So, but you can make the music softer, and then I can re-record my voice over it again. So that was one.
Yeah, my one regret about the House of Music was that they among the, multimodal options, they have a smartphone app that I could have downloaded
Oh.
to my phone, and I think that would have given me more text, because it was still a text-heavy. Some of the display spaces
Very
were
text-heavy.
text-heavy, and so I think, but since I didn't try it, I don't know for sure that would have been available by this other means. But that was we didn't know in advance we were going to go there. So, but still, the interaction, or the appeal of that museum was that there were things you could listen to. There was the thing where you roll the dice and it makes music. There was the conducting thing.
Yeah, actual body interaction.
There was a lot of
Body
body interaction, and it was not. I mean, one of the many frustrations of the Architect Museum was that the only thing you could touch was in the children's corner.
Yeah.
Which is very typical, because
yes, exactly.
The touch is always infantilized as something only appropriate for
Right.
children,
Yeah.
and even those objects were not discernible. I mean, I think they were designed to be docent objects, so that somebody had to explain what it was that you were doing with them. But in the House of Music, there were all those different sites of interaction, and some of the fun of it was also watching other people interact with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, with the one where you conduct the orchestra, which was very appealing to children, but also the adults were kind of engaged with the whole production. And then with that group of high school boys who came through, there was sort of an appealing interaction where the one bully boy was trying to push forward someone else, and the teacher said, "Oh no, you do it." And
Bully boy, gonna conduct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that too often museums are understood as a space of private interaction with art or artifacts, but in fact they are public spaces. And there is an appeal when something compels viewers who are strangers, or visitors who are strangers, to
Bond with one another. Yeah.
And in these cases, it was through barriers of language,
Right.
because there was, the high school boys were German. One group with children was French.
Yeah.
There was another group of English-speaking with children, so that there was sort of
Right.
Yeah.
everybody got the point of the display,
Yeah.
even though the video was in German, but everybody figured out, the conductor is giving me instructions,
Yeah.
and now I have to follow what he's doing.
That was also the space where the first thing that as we entered the space, like the first step, the first moment, because you went to the side, the right-hand side, to get the guardrail. There were steps up,
Yeah.
and you then stepped on the piano keys. So
Yes.
the steps were
Yeah.
piano keys
Yeah.
arranged, and do, re, mi, and all the sharps
Yeah.
and flats too, on do, re, mi, and you stepped on it and sort of jumped back.
Yeah.
But it was like the last.
And I got that on video.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing is that was the one museum that at the front desk where they just did not blink an eye
Yeah.
about our behinder.
Well, talk about this now.
Yeah.
About the entry point for us as three women with disabilities, how our status was read and negotiated in getting into the museum.
Yeah, let's talk about
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Because we're talking about access more largely, but there's access also as the entry
Right.
point, and the way that happened in these different sort of deemed public art
Right.
So I
and
think
historical spaces.
The first place that we went was the Beethoven
Yeah.
And I'm
Nice.
going to take a very short break to get the bottle of wine.
Okay.
So before we actually talk about that, I should say, this is Rosemary, just a moment about Pace, and we are eating here
Yeah.
a German,
Picnic.
yes, picnic. So we have 2 bottles of Gruner Veltliner
There you go.
wine, and we have German Butter and Brot and Käse, and we're having a really nice time. And one of the things I'm noticing about Pace is that all 3 of us filled up plates, and I looked around after what seemed to me to be a moment or two, and both Georgina and Brenda's plates were empty,
Yes.
and I was still slowly buttering my bread. But the affect of that was, oh gosh, I'm always behind because of my awkwardness, which is an interesting, and it may not be awkwardness, it may just be that as an only child I never had to go fast,
Yeah.
and that you all had to compete with siblings to
Yes.
Yeah.
get the goods.
Yep.
But in any case, pace is something for us to talk about in a variety of different environments.
Yeah.
And we're already talking about that. But
I'll write that
in
down.
terms of pace, I'm going to pour more
Pace.
wine.
Let's talk about pace.
Pace.
And we can talk about pace through the museums and talk about access entry points. And then we still have that triangle. And also I want to hear about some frustrations. That
And you
awkwardness.
still have empty plates and mine is full,
Uh-huh.
which leads me to always feel like I'm eating more than I should,
Uh,
which is a girl thing, right?
right.
Taking
Yeah,
up more
yeah.
space.
And it's also like a thing that we do, and I do think that that's human.
Would
in
you bring
general,
your
but
glass?
Again, coded
Yeah.
with disability, where you become self-conscious. There's an inner self-consciousness.
Oh my
that's built
gosh,
into it,
yes.
right? Because you code that as you being too slow. But as Georgina and I explained last night, we both come from families where food was not always very plentiful or prevalent, and there were a lot of other people grabbing for it.
Right.
So, and I eat very slow compared to my sisters.
Really?
Oh gosh.
Because
Yeah.
you're the eldest.
Yeah.
So you had to be
Yeah,
gracious?
If you blink an eye, you'll miss Barb eating an ice cream cone.
Wow.
Yeah. Access entry.
Well, let's go back to the
Okay, and then
access
triangle.
entry.
Right.
Because I can remember each of the museums and sort of note something about our.
The anxiety of
Yeah.
entry.
So the first one we went
Yeah.
to was the Beethoven house.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that we asked about disability concession there.
No, we didn't. It
We didn't.
It wasn't very expensive. It was like €4
I know.
a year. So.
And we, but after the fact, I didn't realize this at the time, but I noticed that the cashier took a hell of a long time to
Right.
process our, different things.
Yeah, and messed mine up, given me.
And the computer he was on seemed to be from 1982.
Yeah.
But then after the fact, you told me that both he and the guard seemed to be disabled.
Well, the guard had glasses that reminded me very much of your glasses and Kathy Kudlick's
Yeah.
glasses,
Yeah.
which are very. And you
Yeah.
thought he had.
His eyes.
His eyes
didn't have
were
straight on
unusual.
gaze. They wandered. They
So
wandered.
maybe he had
And there was a
mental
way that he hung really close.
They wandered separately.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Which
I
is-
I feel fairly
So it might have
confident.
been like Kathy.
Yeah.
But the cashier, you said, had a.
Yeah, one of his hands was, like perhaps cerebral palsy. I
Uh-huh.
can't name what it was, but one
Yeah.
of his hands, and it was the one that he didn't use other than to set my change, the €5 out, and then of course he forgot and he took the €5 back. But I noticed that hand because
Yeah.
he used the other one, which is actually his left hand,
Yeah.
to do the computer, and the right hand was kind of
It's that kind
Yeah,
of.
like
It's that
come back
literary
over.
term, withered,
Yes, yeah.
exactly.
that Tobin used
Yeah.
to use about
Yeah.
my withered
My
limb.
wither- limb,
And he
yes.
kept
Which
it
is
kind of hooked.
Belletristic.
Yeah.
Kind of
But
hooked.
it sort of led us to wonder if, Beethoven House was not a
Yeah.
high volume.
Yeah.
Nobody was there but us.
Nobody. There were a couple people later, but
It was hard to
and
find.
wondering if this might be some sort of government scheme to employ
Yeah.
people with
Mhm.
disabilities in a low-paying, low-stress
Sort of a
environment.
sheltered aesthetic
A
workshop.
shelter, yeah, exactly. Then where did we go next? We went to the
Well, I
one.
say something first before we go on past that. So the Beethoven House also, I mean, the access itself, it was hard to find.
Mhm.
When
Yeah.
we wandered around, we had to ask several people. You
Yeah.
know, when we were
Oh,
on
to
the back
even find
street,
it,
which
yeah.
also made me anxious because both in addition to language barriers and how we're perceived,
Right.
right?
Helpless women.
Right. But then, ironically, we found, because we had to wander around, we found that totally lovely little lunch cafe. That we
Yeah.
went
That was
into.
our best lunch.
That was lovely. So,
The guy
We-
was desperate for business.
But after we arrived, the place filled up.
Remember,
But we had-
the
for the
tables
record-
are reserved.
For the record, we had white asparagus.
Mhm.
Um,
Spargel.
yeah. So the next museum we went to that afternoon was that we haven't mentioned already, was the one with the American photographer.
Oh.
What?
Yeah, the American photographers. So the Kunstmuseum, the Kunst Art
Right.
Art Forum, Kunstforum, it was called, and the really well-known American
right, yes.
photographer, which started with the
Welling,
W.
was it?
Walling.
Welling, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Welling, I think.
Yeah.
We will look it up.
James
Right.
Welling.
James Welling,
Yeah.
James Welling.
who's our contemporary, more or less.
Yes, absolutely.
And there, the access, I think then we asked, did we ask for a disability concession there?
We always asked.
Not at
I don't
the
remember asking
Beethoven
there,
House.
but you're right.
Yeah. And I don't remember if they gave us anything or not.
Yeah.
But it was at the Freud Museum
Right.
where he instantly gave me
Mm-hmm.
the reduced file
Without
fare,
asking.
without
Right.
asking.
Yeah.
Was it reduced, or were you to come in free?
I think I came in free, maybe.
Yeah. Yep.
I
Yeah,
came
you
in
said
free, and then
I always pipe up.
yes, and Rosemarie piped up, but at that point, Brenda had already paid.
Paid.
Right.
Brenda had paid for. That's right. Brenda paid first. I came forward holding my money,
Uh-huh.
and he said, "No,
No.
I know. They won't take your money once they.
once they have identified you." And
Right.
then Rosemarie piped up and indicated her embodiment, and he was willing to.
He didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
He didn't have a script for that.
Yes, but I think he let you in free, didn't he?
I don't remember.
I don't remember.
I think what we need to do, of course, what I was working toward is a preemptive announcement. She's blind.
Yeah,
I have one arm. She's deaf.
Yeah.
But
I think we
We
got
didn't
to
quite
that
work
the
that
second
up.
the second day, which was when we
Yeah.
went.
And maybe that's a script we should use from
Yeah.
now on. Just like put it out there.
Just
the
put it
three
out
of
there.
us.
Yeah.
At the Architecture Museum, I think it was the same discount with our Vienna card as with the disability. So we
Yeah.
just went with that.
Yeah.
He wasn't going to give us a double discount, so
Right.
we all got that.
But yet
Um,
other places did let us double dip.
At the music
Well, at the
Museum,
music museum,
The
he's-
guy said, "We'll give you I'll give you
Yes,
the best deal."
He
Yeah.
said, yes, exactly. He was looking on his computer,
Right, for all the discounts.
but it was as if they had been primed for this possibility. This
Yeah.
might happen here,
Yeah.
so be
Right.
prepared.
Yeah.
So he had instructions on what to do if 3 American women come in with multiple disabilities and Vienna cards,
Right. This is
how
how
to
you
handle
do
it.
Yeah, it's like the start of a story.
Yeah.
And then once upon a
Yes,
time.
3 American women with multiple disabilities.
And he didn't seem to be surprised.
No,
No.
that's what I said. They were just completely nonplussed by it all. And you know what's now striking me about this, which again is obvious, but I'll just say it anyway, is that again how completely relational disability is.
Yes.
In terms of how the audience reads it, actually reshapes how we are, because each one of these places was both a different reaction but a different price.
Yeah.
And then negotiated that differently. It means that there's not some sort of universal
Yeah.
about what
Right.
the behindered, disabled,
Yeah.
discount shall be, because every place treated it differently
Yeah.
as a puzzle to be solved.
Because in other countries, for instance, in France, and I've encountered it elsewhere, they will make a concession that is both for the blind person and for her companion.
Yeah.
We
So-
saw that in England too, I think.
Yeah. So there's an idea that blind people are never by themselves in a
Right.
museum.
Right. Annie's always with them.
Somebody's always with them,
Right.
and therefore you basically get 2 for the price of 1 or something.
Right.
There's some reduction there, but that doesn't seem to be the norm here. They don't seem to have anything about the companion person. So at the museum, with the Klimt and the
Yeah, the Leopold. It's
Or the
called.
Leopold,
Yeah,
yes.
the Austrian artist. Yeah,
yeah,
contemporary.
what was the deal there?
I don't remember.
Me either.
I mean, I think at that point we had our script.
We
so-
had
Yeah.
our script. That's exactly
I do
right.
remember that the discount for behindered or for disability was the same as our
our Vienna card.
Our Vienna card pass.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was 6
It-
maps, right?
Yeah,
I remember
was-
at some point, because Georgina and I ended up being so legible,
Mhm.
that you said at one museum, well, I'm almost deaf.
Yeah. I don't remember.
And I
think that was at
remember
the Freud-
saying
that was at the Freud Museum.
To you, well, next time, just I'll point at you and say, she's deaf.
and I'll sign.
That was at the Freud Museum
Yeah.
because she had already paid, and
Yeah.
then we were,
Of course, I mean, I just thought this that makes me. It's like that the anxieties again, like you
Oh,
expressed
yeah.
about that makes me very nervous because I mean, it does because I'm not completely and totally
Right.
deaf, and because there are people who are completely and totally deaf, and I think so. It's coded
Oh,
in me
right.
that I
Not-
always have to.
not disabled enough.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
I
my
mean,
that scene for me is played out with my disabled parking
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
sticker, which
Yeah.
of course
Yeah.
the sturdiest part of my entire body is my legs,
Yeah.
which is imagined as the major disqualifier for
Yeah.
parking.
I'm getting
Well-
more cheese.
Yeah, more food.
But that's probably a thing for me to set
Yeah.
to the side. But that's like the anxiety. of
Well,
it.
but
and you know, maybe,
is that preemptive of me to say that?
no?
I mean, in an environment where we are navigating our own legibility and identity,
No, but again, that's another script that's written in
Right.
for most of us too. Is that
somebody talking
and
for
and
us,
then especially reinforced by the ADA that tells us that people can't ask us these things, that
right?
it's literally illegal, right?
Right.
And discrimination, and so we double coded then to not want to speak for other people, but sometimes that's what really helped. So no, it didn't bother me at all. I think I just felt comfortable like laying it right out there. And I think especially at the Freud Museum because I'd already paid, so it
Yeah.
was kind of like going through my head, do I make the move or not? Maybe also, I don't know, I was trying to read that moment because the whole Freud Museum, for 3/4 of our time there, I just felt like I did not belong there. But I think it's Freud, right?
Well, of course.
And also because there was the audio channel, and then there was all of these pictures and text, and you guys are bipping along with the audio thing, and I don't know what you're getting, and I'm not. And then I discovered that there was a book, a
Right.
little booklet that they had that kind of, and it turned out that book, for example, had Freud commenting himself on some of the elements of when the photograph on some of his publications. And wow, that was like a magical delight, because some of Freud's comments on his own publication, which I took pictures of, deeply referenced disability aspects.
Well, I didn't have the audio guide, so you were helpful to me in interpreting that space.
Yeah.
I would say, oh, here's something, what does it say? And then you could show me from your booklet.
Yeah. And that's what I ran and got Georgina even too, because then said, read to her something from the book of Freud.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That he had said about the one on aphasia, and then also the one on hysteria. The publication.
And the whole time in that museum, I was haunted by his essay on the exceptions, in which he talks about, which has affected me and many of us, I think, because Freud is such a dominant narrative of knowledge and being. You know, we've got Marx and Freud and Foucault that kind of run our critical theory. And, you know, Freud's main narrative of disability is that essay called The Exceptions, where he describes a caricature, a stereotype of the narcissistic cripple, which Tobin Siebers was extraordinarily sensitive about. But man, if you read it, it's awful in its stereotypical portrayal. And then Brenda and I were figuring out that Freud himself was in the category of exception for a long time.
Oh, that was what was
with
so
his
uncanny.
Cancer. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the cancer late, so the cancer late, which he writes about in front of a photo, but I also then, it only just now came to me, he was also always exception even at that time, because he was so Jewish.
Yeah.
Right? And had to leave the country. And there was a way in which he knew that.
Yeah.
Also. But this is what we talk about, this happening also in disability, the othering of other disabilities. That happens in our circle or not. But that one public, I took pictures of it, but it was basically a publication that was on cognitively disabled children. I can't remember the exact title. We'll look it up and add it in. But he says, his comments are that he's surprised at, something like one can never know about the reception of one's own book. I wrote this one literally overnight, and yet it's one of my most popular.
Oh, with cerebral palsy.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, cerebral palsy, that's right. Yeah. So that was,
Well, to go back just to your, to affect for a moment, and your anxiety about being outed as disabled, and whether you're disabled enough, is that the contrast is that the House of Music, I don't think any of us felt that way, because the guy said, well, we'll get you the best price for the disability concession and the Vienna card, but also that they, on the surface you would say, why does a deaf person go to a museum about music?
Right.
And he did not seem it was because, and then when we got upstairs, we saw there's all this stuff about, the science of hearing and all that sort of stuff. So clearly it was a museum that was set up with an expectation that people of various varieties were going to show up. And so as a result, I think it felt less vexed to get in. It was like you said, oh, I can't hear, and it was like, oh, fine, whatever, we'll do it, it's fine, and so it didn't raise the same sort of
Yeah, both because access of entry and then reading about it in the book too. When I saw they had all these kind of interactive things
Yeah,
that were related to sound. I
yeah,
guess the flip side, and as I often narrated, music is always the watermark of
Mhm.
deafness. When
Right.
you meet the average person on the street about music, that's the first thing that they immediately feel
Well, and
sorry
the
for.
goddamn birds, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Words, right. Words and music. It's like an Alfred Hitchcock movie in the making.
Exactly.
Yeah, but so both that, right, and that
One of the
moment.
things that I was wondering about is the issue of the generations and how different generations respond to disability, and the threshold.
Yeah.
When in my perpetual historic narrative about disability, the threshold, of course, is the mid 20th century civil rights movement, when worldwide diversity is launched, or an acceptance of diversity is launched, if you will, about disability becoming for the first time an identity and a social category, the minority understanding of disability. And I wonder if people of the generation, the post, of course, in the United States, we say the post-ADA and the pre-ADA generation, but we also talk about that in the US in terms of race, the pre and post-civil rights generations, which are profoundly different in their understanding of the experience of race. But in terms of disability, so the man in the music museum was young enough to be in the post-civil rights, the
Yep,
post-human
absolutely.
rights
Yeah.
generation, which is worldwide, of course, because even when the U.S. is going on with our laws, parallel things are happening in the Western world, in the developed world. And what I've found, and I've mentioned this to you guys before, is that there's a kind of, they're not surprised when we show up because, in their lifetimes, we've somehow been there.
Yeah.
I mentioned to you when I was reminded of this when I went through the new technology for getting through clearance at the airport that's called Clear.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was trying to do with this young woman about the same age as the guy in the music museum who was giving us our tickets, this young woman, because the technology was not recognizing the fact that I have 3 fingers, not 4 fingers on my hand, without missing a beat in trying to get through this technological barrier, she just stuck up her other finger and put it in on my hand, and we were released to go through. And I had a sense that, and she didn't bat an eye, miss a beat, anything. This is what's necessary to get this technology to recognize you. None of this, what happened to you, oh my God, nothing. It was just, oh, here we are, we got a technology problem, let me solve it. And I felt that this guy was a little bit that way too. We want to get you the best rate in here, so how would we do it?
History, education, context, right? That they've lived a
Right.
different life and context. Yeah. I also wondered, as I puzzled through that, I want to guess, but this could be a complete presumption, that the guys that were at the counter there in the House of Music were involved with music in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Because given all the people a place like that could employ, why would they want to have someone with music? And there is a way in which music is a universal language. It doesn't have language barriers, and if they've studied sound, they probably know that. They probably know of Evan Glennie, the famous.
Exactly.
So the music again in Beethoven was deaf, so it doesn't have to have those kind of barriers. There was just definitely something that was really. Too bad we could go back and interview them.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hi, we're
let me
back.
get your name.
Hi, we're back. We have down I'm looking at time because we might want to stop and split this up because if the file gets so large,
Yeah,
it
it's hard to
becomes,
move.
yeah. Oh, away from me a type thing.
We'll also need to plan out our next move for food and drink.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have to do it right this time. Oh, it has. Okay. Come on. There
While
we go.
you're doing that, it feels to me like it's going quite well. Does it feel like that to you
absolutely.
guys?
I'm just thinking we're at 45 minutes, so I'm going to stop and pause this one here.